Tudor England, the rise, reign, and legacy of the Tudor dynasty. England in the 16th century was a kingdom transformed by ambition, religion, war, royal power, and extraordinary personalities. It was an age when kings and queens could change the direction of an entire nation, when religious beliefs could divide families and communities, and when England began to look beyond Europe toward a wider world. At the center of this dramatic period was the Tudor dynasty. The Tudor story began in the aftermath of civil war and ended with the death of a queen who became one of the most famous monarchs in English history. Between those two moments, England experienced political revolutions, religious upheaval, royal marriages, executions, rebellions, international conflicts, cultural change, and the beginnings of England's growing power on the world stage. The Tudor dynasty ruled England from 1485 to 1603. 5 monarchs sat on the English throne during this period: Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. Their personalities were very different, but together they created one of the most fascinating periods in English history. The beginning of the Tudor dynasty. To understand the Tudors, we must first go back to the 15th century. England had been weakened by decades of conflict known as the Wars of the Roses. 2 powerful royal houses, the House of Lancaster and the House of York, fought for control of the English throne. The wars brought instability to England. Noble families changed sides, armies marched across the country, and several kings claimed the crown. Then, in 1485, a Welsh nobleman named Henry Tudor entered England with an army. Henry had a relatively weak claim to the throne, but he had something more important: an opportunity. His opponent was King Richard III, the Yorkist king. The two armies met at the Battle of Bosworth Field on August 22, 1485. Richard III fought bravely, but his forces were defeated. According to tradition, Richard was killed during the battle. Henry Tudor emerged victorious. He became King Henry VII. With this victory, the Tudor dynasty began. Henry understood that his position was not completely secure. His claim to the throne was complicated, and many Yorkist supporters remained powerful. To strengthen his position, Henry married Elizabeth of York, the daughter of Edward IV. The marriage united the rival houses of Lancaster and York. It was a powerful political symbol. The wars that had divided England were effectively brought to an end, and the famous Tudor Rose became associated with the union of the two houses. Henry VII, the king who rebuilt England. Henry VII was not the dramatic warrior king that later Tudor monarchs would become. He was careful, cautious, and extremely interested in money and political stability. After years of civil war, England needed peace. Henry worked to strengthen royal authority and reduce the power of nobles who could challenge the crown. He also focused heavily on finances. The king increased royal revenue through taxes, fines, and other financial arrangements. His methods were sometimes unpopular, but they helped create a stronger monarchy. Henry also understood the importance of diplomacy. Instead of constantly fighting European powers, he often preferred negotiation and marriage alliances. His eldest son, Arthur, Prince of Wales, was married to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess. The marriage was intended to strengthen relations between England and Spain, but tragedy soon struck. Arthur died in 1502, only months after his marriage. His younger brother, Henry, became the heir to the throne. That young prince would eventually become one of the most famous kings in English history. Henry VII died in 1509. His son became Henry VIII. Henry VIII, the king who changed England. When Henry VIII became king in 1509, he was only 17 years old. Unlike his father, Henry VIII loved ceremony, music, sports, hunting, warfare, and displays of royal power. He was tall, educated, ambitious, and determined to be remembered as a great king. One of the most important events of his reign involved his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine had originally been married to Henry's older brother Arthur. After Arthur's death, she eventually married Henry VIII. Their marriage lasted for many years. They had a daughter, Mary, but Henry desperately wanted a male heir. For Henry, this was not simply a family matter. He believed that a male heir was necessary to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. As the years passed, Catherine did not give him the son he wanted. Henry eventually became convinced that his marriage should end. But there was a major problem. Catherine was a Catholic queen, and the marriage had received papal approval. Henry asked the Pope to annul the marriage. The Pope refused. Henry then took a step that would transform English history. The break with Rome. Henry gradually moved England away from the authority of the Pope. The king declared himself the supreme head of the Church in England. This was the beginning of the English Reformation. The change was not initially a simple rejection of Christianity. Henry still held many traditional Catholic beliefs, but politically, England was becoming independent from papal authority. Henry's marriage to Catherine was eventually declared invalid. He married Anne Boleyn. In 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth. Henry had hoped for a son. Instead, another daughter had arrived. Nevertheless, Elizabeth would one day become one of England's greatest monarchs. The dissolution of the monasteries, Henry's religious and political revolution, went even further. Across England were hundreds of monasteries and religious houses. Henry's government began closing them and taking control of their lands and wealth. This process became known as the dissolution of the monasteries. Monastic lands were sold or given to supporters of the king. The changes transformed the English landscape. Some monasteries were destroyed. Others were converted into private properties. For ordinary people, the changes could be confusing and frightening. Religious life that had existed for generations was suddenly being reorganized by royal command. The Reformation also created resistance. One major rebellion was the Pilgrimage of Grace in 1536. Thousands of people in northern England protested against Henry's religious policies and other government changes. The rebellion was eventually defeated. Henry remained in control. The 6 wives of Henry VIII. Henry VIII is perhaps most famous for his 6 marriages. His wives were Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, Catherine Parr. Each marriage had its own political and personal story. Anne Boleyn became queen, but was later accused of treason and executed in 1536. Her daughter Elizabeth was only a young child. Jane Seymour became Henry's 3rd wife, and finally gave him the son he wanted. In 1537, she gave birth to Edward, the future Edward VI. Jane died shortly after giving birth. Henry's 4th marriage, to Anne of Cleves, was arranged for political reasons but ended quickly. His 5th wife, Catherine Howard, was executed after accusations of adultery. His 6th wife, Catherine Parr, survived Henry and played an important role in the education of his children. Henry VIII died in 1547. His only surviving son became king. He was just 9 years old. Edward VI, the boy king. Edward VI became king in 1547. Because he was so young, powerful advisors governed the country on his behalf. Edward was strongly influenced by Protestant ideas. During his reign, England moved further away from traditional Catholic practices. The Book of Common Prayer was introduced, helping establish Protestant worship in English churches. But religious change created resistance. In 1549, the Prayer Book Rebellion broke out in Cornwall and Devon. The rebels objected to religious reforms and other government policies. The rebellion was eventually suppressed. Edward's reign was short. He became seriously ill and died in 1553 at the age of 15. Before his death, political leaders attempted to prevent his Catholic half-sister Mary from becoming queen. Instead, they supported Lady Jane Grey. Jane became queen for only a few days. Mary's supporters gathered around her. Jane's reign collapsed. Mary entered London and became queen. Mary I, a Catholic queen in a Protestant England. Mary I was the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon. She had spent much of her life watching her father's government reject her mother's marriage and change England's religion. When Mary became queen, she wanted to restore Catholicism. She married Philip of Spain, creating controversy among many English people who feared Spanish influence. Mary's government restored Catholic authority and began prosecuting Protestants who refused to accept the changes. Hundreds of Protestants were executed for heresy. Because of these executions, Mary became known by the later nickname Bloody Mary. Her reign remains controversial. Mary believed she was defending her faith and restoring religious unity, but the persecution created fear and hatred among many of her subjects. Her attempt to produce an heir also failed. Mary suffered several illnesses and had no surviving child. In 1558, she died. The Tudor crown passed to her half-sister. Her name was Elizabeth. Elizabeth I, the queen who changed England. Elizabeth became queen in November 1558. She inherited a deeply divided country. England had experienced rapid religious changes under Henry VIII, Edward VI, and Mary I. Elizabeth needed to create stability. She also faced international threats. At first, many people doubted whether a woman could successfully rule England. Elizabeth proved them wrong. She became one of the most politically skilled monarchs in English history. One of her greatest achievements was finding a religious settlement that was neither completely Catholic nor radically Protestant. The Elizabethan religious settlement established the Church of England under royal authority, while allowing a degree of continuity with older traditions. It did not satisfy everyone. Catholics remained unhappy. More radical Protestants, later associated with Puritanism, also believed the reforms had not gone far enough, but Elizabeth managed to maintain political control. Elizabeth and the question of marriage. One of the biggest questions of Elizabeth's reign was marriage. England expected its queen to marry and produce an heir. Elizabeth received proposals from powerful European princes and kings, but she never married. Her decision was politically useful. Marriage could have placed England under the influence of another country. It could also have divided her subjects. Instead, Elizabeth presented herself as married to England itself. Her unmarried status became part of her political image. She became known as the Virgin Queen. Her government carefully developed an image of Elizabeth as powerful, wise, and almost symbolic of England itself. Portraits, ceremonies, speeches, and royal progresses all helped create this image. England and the Spanish Armada. One of the greatest challenges of Elizabeth's reign came from Spain. Relations between England and Spain had deteriorated for several reasons, including religion, trade, and English involvement in conflicts involving Spanish territories. England also supported attacks on Spanish shipping and assisted the Dutch rebels fighting Spanish rule. Eventually, King Philip II of Spain decided to launch a major invasion of England. In 1588, the Spanish Armada sailed toward England. The Spanish fleet was enormous. England prepared its ships and defenses. The English used faster ships and long-range naval tactics. Then the weather became a crucial factor. A major storm scattered the Spanish fleet. The invasion failed. The defeat became one of the most famous events of Elizabeth's reign. It strengthened England's national confidence and contributed to the legend of Elizabeth as a strong wartime queen. According to a famous tradition, Elizabeth visited troops at Tilbury and delivered a powerful speech expressing confidence in her soldiers. Whether every famous version of the speech is exactly what she said is uncertain, but the story became an important part of her historical image. Life in Tudor England. The Tudor period was not only about kings and queens. For ordinary people, life was very different from life today. Most people lived in villages and worked in agriculture. Farming was the foundation of the economy. People grew crops, raised animals, and depended heavily on weather conditions. A bad harvest could create serious hardship. Food was often seasonal. The wealthy enjoyed a much greater variety of food than ordinary workers. Homes also differed dramatically. Rich families could live in large stone houses with many rooms, servants, decorated halls, and expensive furniture. Poor families often lived in small houses with basic furnishings. Clothing was another sign of social status. The wealthy could afford fine fabrics, elaborate designs, and expensive accessories. Laws sometimes attempted to control what different social classes were allowed to wear. These were known as sumptuary laws. Tudor cities. London became increasingly important during the Tudor period. It was a busy centre of trade, politics, and culture. The River Thames played a major role in transportation. Merchants brought goods into the city, while craftsmen produced products for local and international markets. But Tudor London was also crowded and unhealthy. Streets could be narrow and dirty. Disease was a constant danger. Fire was another threat because many buildings were constructed from wood. Yet London was also a city of opportunity. People from different parts of England arrived hoping to find work and improve their lives. Crime and punishment. Tudor society had harsh punishments. The government believed severe punishment was necessary to maintain order. Prisons existed, although they were not like modern prisons. Public punishment was common. Executions could attract large crowds. Treason against the king or queen was considered one of the most serious crimes. The monarchy believed that political rebellion threatened the entire kingdom. As a result, Tudor rulers could respond brutally to rebellions and challenges. The period reminds us how different ideas about justice and government were from those of the modern world. Tudor culture and the Renaissance. The Tudor Age was also a remarkable period for culture. The Renaissance was spreading across Europe, bringing renewed interest in classical learning, literature, science, art, and human achievement. England experienced this cultural transformation. Education expanded among the wealthy and middle classes. The printing press helped books and ideas spread more widely. And then came one of the greatest writers in English history, William Shakespeare. Shakespeare's career developed during the Elizabethan and early Stuart periods. His plays were performed in London theatres and became enormously influential. The opening of theatres such as the Globe Theatre created new opportunities for dramatic performance. Audiences from different social backgrounds could enjoy plays. Shakespeare wrote tragedies, comedies, and histories. His works would eventually become famous around the world. The Elizabethan age therefore became associated not only with political power, but also with literature and culture, exploration, and the wider world. The Tudor period also saw England become more interested in exploration. English sailors traveled across the Atlantic and searched for new trade routes and opportunities. Explorers such as Sir Francis Drake became famous. Drake's circumnavigation of the globe demonstrated England's growing maritime ambitions. English voyages also brought England into greater contact and conflict with other European powers. These developments were early steps toward England's later global expansion. However, it is important to remember that Tudor exploration was not simply a story of heroic adventure. It was connected to competition for trade, wealth, territory, and influence. European powers were beginning to compete on a global scale. England wanted its share. The end of the Tudor dynasty, Elizabeth I ruled England for almost 45 years. Her reign became one of the longest and most important in Tudor history. But she faced the same problem that had troubled earlier monarchs. She had no children. As Elizabeth grew older, questions about the succession became increasingly important. Who would become king or queen after her? The answer eventually came from Scotland. Elizabeth's closest dynastic successor was James VI of Scotland, the son of Mary, Queen of Scots. When Elizabeth died in 1603, James became James I of England. The Tudor dynasty had ended. The Stuart dynasty had begun. The legacy of the Tudor period lasted just over a century, but its influence was enormous. Henry VII created a more stable monarchy after the Wars of the Roses. Henry VIII transformed the relationship between the English crown and the church. Edward VI pushed England further toward Protestantism. Mary I attempted to restore Catholicism. Elizabeth I established a more lasting Protestant settlement and strengthened England's international position. The Tudors changed religion, politics, government, culture, and England's relationship with Europe. They also left behind some of the most famous personalities in British history. Henry VIII remains famous for his 6 marriages and his break with Rome. Anne Boleyn remains one of the most discussed queens in English history. Elizabeth I became a symbol of political strength and national identity. Shakespeare's works gave the Elizabethan period an enduring cultural legacy. And the Tudor Rose became one of the most recognizable symbols associated with English history. Conclusion: the story of Tudor England is ultimately a story of transformation. It began with a battle on a field in 1485, when Henry Tudor defeated Richard III and claimed the English crown. It continued through the ambitious reign of Henry VII, the dramatic rule of Henry VIII, the religious changes of Edward VI, the Catholic restoration of Mary I, and the remarkable reign of Elizabeth I. During these years, England changed profoundly. The authority of the monarchy became stronger. The country's religious identity was transformed. England became increasingly involved in European conflicts and overseas exploration. London expanded. Education and printing spread. Theatre and literature flourished. And England began moving toward a future in which it would become a major global power. But Tudor England was also a world of uncertainty. Kings and queens could fall from power. Religious beliefs could determine whether a person lived or died. Political rebellion could bring terrible consequences. Disease and hunger could affect ordinary families. The lives of the rich and poor were separated by enormous differences. That combination of glory and hardship makes Tudor England so fascinating. The Tudor dynasty was relatively short, but its story remains alive centuries later. It was an age of kings and queens, castles and palaces, battles and rebellions, faith and fear, exploration and discovery. Above all, it was an age in which England was being reshaped. And when Elizabeth I died in 1603, the Tudor story came to an end, but the England they had helped create was only beginning its next chapter.